If you want to develop with Apache, MySQL, and PHP on Linux, you'll find it very easy to get started. The original AMP stack was called LAMP for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And you install it on Linux using the apt-get package manager. This is an interface that's available on all Linux distributions. It'll automatically pull the right version of each component for your Linux distribution, based on a list of applications that the distribution maintains. To follow along, you'll need a Linux distribution. I'm using Ubuntu Linux, but you can use pretty much any other version. And you'll need a web browser. I'll be using the Firefox browser that's included with this distribution. I'll start in the Terminal application. You can start up Terminal from within Ubuntu Linux by going to the search dialog, typing the beginning of the application name, and then clicking the appropriate icon. Before you install any of the individual components, you should execute the update statement. This will update your application list to the most recent versions. And it looks like this: sudo apt-get update. Just as in Mac, the sudo command means execute this command as the super user. So when you try to execute it, you'll be asked for your administrative password. I'll type it in and press return, and that looks up at the Ubuntu servers and updates the application list. It'll take just a moment to read all the sources and then download any updates. When the command line returns, we're ready for the next step. Now I'm going to install Apache, and that command looks like this: sudo apt-get install Apache 2. After just a moment, you'll see a prompt asking you if you want to continue and telling you how much disk space will be used. I'll press Y for yes and then return, and we're off to the races. Apache will now be downloaded and installed, and it'll even be started up. When the command line returns, we're ready for the next step. I'll go to my browser, and I'll click up here for the address, and I'll type http://localhost and press return. If you see this page, that means Apache is working correctly. Now, before I finish this video, I'll show you where everything goes. First of all, Apache is installed in the folder /etc/Apache2. This folder includes the apache2.conf file. That's your primary configuration file for Apache when installing on Linux. And your document root folder is here, under var/www/html. I'll list the files there, and I'll find index.html. This is your document root folder, where you'll want to put your HTML files, your graphical files, and other web assets. So that's how easy it is to get started with Apache. In the next couple of videos, I'll show you how to install PHP and MySQL using the same command line interface, the apt-get package manager. After installing and testing Apache, the next step is to install PHP. Once again, I'll be working in Terminal and using the apt-get package manager. I'll type sudo apt-get install PHP 5, and that will download and install the latest version of PHP for this Linux distribution. When prompted to continue, once again, I'll press Y for yes and return, and that will download all of the files, install PHP, and add the integration to Apache. So you should be able to run PHP scripts immediately. When the command line returns, you're ready to test. Now, by default, when you installed Apache, the HTML folder where you put your files will be marked as read-only. Before you can add files, you need to change the permissions. I'm going to change to the var www folder. And once again, I'll list the files, and this time I see the HTML subfolder. That's my document root folder. Now I'm going to change the permissions on the folder. I'll use sudo chmod, and then I'll type 777 and the name of the folder, HTML. And that makes the folder read-write for all users. Now remember, this is a local installation. These permissions are too broad for a production server, but this is a quick and dirty way to be able to add files to your local HTML document root folder. Now I'm going to use a text editor. I'm going to use kwrite, which I've installed in this distribution, but you can use any text editor you like. And I'll create a very simple PHP script. I'll start with open bracket, question mark, PHP, and I'm going to expand the font a bit so it's a little easier to read. And then I'll type PHP info, open and close paren, and then I'll close the PHP block. Then I'll click Save As. I'll type /var www.html and press Enter. And then I'll name this file phpinfo.php, and I'll save. Now I'll go back to Terminal, and I'll switch to the HTML subfolder and list the files, and there's my PHP info file. Then I'll go to my browser, and I'll type in localhost/phpinfo.php. And there's the result. On this Linux distribution, I'm running PHP version 5.5, and I see where my loaded configuration file is, under etc php5 apache 2 php.ini. If you want to make any changes to your PHP configuration, that's the file you would modify. And you can scroll down and find out a lot more information about your Apache and PHP installation. If you've gotten this far, you have a working PHP installation, using whichever version of PHP is supported automatically by your Linux distribution. So far, I've described how to install Apache 2 and PHP on Linux. The next step is to install MySQL. And to test MySQL, I'll install phpMyAdmin at the same time. phpMyAdmin is supported by the apt-get package manager on Linux, so the steps are somewhat different than working on Mac or Windows. I'll start with MySQL. This will be a fairly long command, so it's going to wrap onto another line. Start with sudo, then apt-get, then install, and you'll install 3 components. First, MySQL itself, represented with MySQL-server. Then a connector between Apache and MySQL. It looks like this: lib apache 2-mod-auth-mysql. And finally, a bridge between PHP and MySQL. php5-mysql. Read through your command carefully, make sure there aren't any misspellings, and then press Enter. If you're prompted for your administrator password, type it in. Once again, the package manager figures out what needs to be installed and then prompts you to continue. I'll say yes and press Enter. This is a larger installation than PHP 5, so it'll take a few moments to download and copy everything to your hard disk and set up some basic configurations. When you see this prompt, type in an administrative password for your MySQL root user. I'll use a very simple password since I'm working on a local installation. I'll type it in once and press Enter, and then type it in again and press Enter again. And the installation continues. When you get back to the command prompt, MySQL will have been installed and it will be started up already. And you'll be ready for the next step, installing phpMyAdmin. Next, to install phpMyAdmin, execute this command: sudo apt-get install, then phpMyAdmin, all lowercase, and apache 2-utils. Once again, confirm, and then the installation will continue. It takes a few moments for everything to copy over, And then you're prompted to choose a web server that should be automatically configured to run PHP-MyAdmin. In this screen, you can move up and down with your arrows. I'm choosing Apache 2, and then I'll press Enter to continue with the install. On this screen, I'll just press Enter to configure my database for PHP-MyAdmin with dbconfig-common. Next, I'm asked for the password of the administrative user, and I'll type the same password that I entered when I installed MySQL. I'll press Enter, and then I'll use the same password for the MySQL application password. I'll type that twice, and that finishes the primary installation. Now, we're not quite done yet. PHP-MyAdmin isn't available yet. I need to make a manual change to my Apache 2 configuration file, and I'll do that with the nano editor. I'll type sudo nano, then /etc/apache2/apache2.conf, the primary configuration file. Now I'm going to page down to the bottom of the file. I'll press Ctrl-V a bunch of times until I get down to the end. And then I'm going to add a new directive. It'll look like this: include /etc/phpMyAdmin/apache.conf. This includes a configuration file that's a part of the PHP-MyAdmin installation. And that folder is where PHP-MyAdmin is installed, under /etc/phpMyAdmin. I'll press Ctrl-X to exit, then Y for yes, and Enter. And that saves the file. And now I'm going to restart Apache with this command: sudo service apache2 restart. And that's the command you can use whenever you need to restart your Apache installation. And finally, I'm ready to fire up PHP-MyAdmin. I'll go to a browser, and I'll type localhost/PHP-MyAdmin. And if everything goes well, you should get to the PHP-MyAdmin login screen. I'll type the username for the administrative user and the password that I created when I installed MySQL. If your browser prompts you, you can remember the password to easily get into PHP-MyAdmin in the future. And if you see this screen, you now have MySQL working, and you have an administrative interface you can use to create your databases. I have some more information about PHP-MyAdmin in the chapter on the product, and there's also an entire course on PHP-MyAdmin in the lynda.com library. But this is enough to get you started with working with Apache, MySQL, and PHP on Linux.